guys, welcome back to the Confused Millennial Podcast. I'm Rachel, your host and the blogger behind theconfusedmillennial.com, and this is a podcast all about helping you embrace more of who you are while navigating this whole adulting thing. And we recently dropped down to every other week episode. So if you haven't hit the subscribe button on whichever player you're listening on, I highly encourage it so that you don't miss an episode. And today's episode was highly requested. A lot of you guys, when I asked on my Insta stories who and what types of guests you wanted to see more of, so many of you guys asked for another astrologer to come on. And I immediately knew the person I wanted to ask, Debra Silverman. So Debra Silverman is part astrologer, part psychologist, and as you guys will hear, she's absolutely hilarious, very relatable. She really isn't a millennial herself, but she has so much energy and enthusiasm, and she caters a lot of her products and offerings to millennials. So I kind of like grandfather her into the millennial tribe. She's been practicing for over 40 years, and she's just a total boss. She's written a book. She's been in magazine columns, on radio shows. Her YouTube channel today has over 7 million views. And she's worked with just really notable people from Trevor Hall, who's a musician that we'll talk about later on in this episode, to Sting. And she has a gift. She trains people to practice astrology. And as you'll hear, she just really knows all of her stuff. I had asked you guys previously on my Insta stories to submit your questions for Debra, and we did our best to answer a few of those. We couldn't get through all of them because there were so many, but we talk a little bit about what it means that Pluto is now direct. We talk about what do all of the planets represent in our charts, because again, answering so many of these astrology questions become really tough since it really, really varies down to like the degrees of your chart. And so like, we'll talk about this in the episode a little bit, but like there were 3 eclipses over the summer, and we're all not going to collectively feel all 3 eclipses the same way, nor will one person feel all 3 eclipses the same way, because they're all hitting on different degrees and aspects of your chart. So instead we had to really make this episode a little bit more general, where we talk about what all these different planets are, like what their general theme is. So that way, when you do see astrologers or try to follow your horoscope or anything like that, mention these planets, you kind of understand what that underlying theme of the planet is and maybe how to work with it or how it might impact you. And then we go into a little bit more about Saturn Return, because I know so many of us are in it, or so many of us are getting ready to go into it. And that is always just a really exciting topic in my opinion. And without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into the conversation with Debra. Welcome to the show, Debra.
Thank you.
I'm super excited to have you here. I had found you, I think, like on the Balanced Blondes podcast and on Your Own Magics podcast. And it's just always nice to see somebody that is just so excited about what they do and has so much life and energy around it all.
That's the truth. God, I don't know. They gave me an extra power pack. I've got a large team that I work with, and they're always like, what did you eat this morning? Why do you have so much energy? But it's explained in my chart that I have an excessive amount of fire.
That's amazing. I love how the charts can tell us just so many different things. And like I told you, we had a lot of requests for another astrologer to come on the podcast. And I have a bunch of questions that the audience submitted, including that Pluto is direct right now. And everyone wants to know what on earth that even means.
Yeah. It's not, it have 3... more than 3, probably for Pluto, it's more like 15 times a year. It goes backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. So it's not unusual, and I don't spend a lot of time with it. The short answer is Pluto going direct creates a movement of power. Pluto is P. In astrology, it looks like a P. It stands for power. It rules the underworld. It's a technical question that I tend to neglect the movement of an individual planet, except for Mercury going retrograde and direct, because they happen all the time. So I'm going to make something up right now. And I'm a very practical astrologer. Because I'm also a psychologist. So I'm not the person that makes up random, like, since Pluto's going direct, you're all going to feel an increase of energy. That's where astrology for me becomes cheap. And I don't really participate in that conversation. So the short answer is it will affect you in your personal chart. If Pluto was directly affecting one of your planets, And I know that Pluto right now is at 18 Capricorn. So if you had something, for example, at 18 Capricorn and Pluto was beginning to pass over it in the direct fashion, it's going to have a real influence on your chart. But a general sentence for me right now to make a universal fact that now that Pluto's going direct, we're all going to feel an increase of power is a random abstract term. So it's not a good question to ask me because I don't really do those generalities.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's more relevant to your personal chart. And if someone was a Capricorn and they were born, if it's 18 degrees, if they were born by, like, I'm going to say January 10th, they would feel it directly because Pluto would finally be going direct on their chart. And that is what astrology does. It tells you personally, when will your chart become more available with certain energies and when should you be able to create more or retreat more. It gives you really strong directives. But it's just not fair to generalize. I totally
understand that because I think, there was like 3 eclipses over the summer and everyone felt them at different degrees depending on where that eclipse was hitting on your chart. When you were getting into those types of specifics, it is very chart specific. Like not every Mercury in retrograde is going to be the same shitstorm that the last one may have been for you, like those degrees and those very variable things. Like Debra was just telling me, it takes her 2 to 3 hours to prepare for a chart reading because there's just so many little things within it. I want to go back to one thing that you said though, maybe just to kind of like, get an understanding about Pluto. So when you say Pluto controls the underworld and power, like what does that mean?
That's a more interesting question. So Pluto was found in the 1930s. We never saw it. We've never been able to see it with the human eye. It's so far away and it's so little. It's the smallest of all the planets, but it's the most influential because what happened in the 1930s? World War II, nuclear bombs, Hitler, Freud. First time we ever used the word the unconscious was when Pluto was found. We never had a word for psychology. It's a brand new science. It did not occur in Greece. It did not occur in Egypt. It's a brand new language. So Pluto brought us the awareness of the unconscious mind. That was through Freud.
Wow.
And Carl Jung. Pluto brought us nuclear power. It was Einstein's first discovery that the small little teeny position of a nucleus could destroy or create. It was either fission or fusion. Either it was going to destroy us or it was going to create incredible power for us to increase our voltage. So one was the unconscious mind, one was Pluto energy. And so there's Freud and then there was Hitler. Then Hitler was alive at that time. So that's the collective unconscious that went into a dark, unbelievable universal phase for the whole planet where we started using evil to kill people. So Pluto can go either towards what Freud and Jung did using the unconscious mind to heal us. So, like this is the first time ever I call it her story instead of history. This is the first time in her story that we can speak to the unconscious mind. Like we now as a collective, that's what you're doing on podcast. We're identifying what are the unconscious impulses that operate in your psyche. So for example, I feel jealousy or I feel inadequate or I feel insecure. All that is your unconscious. That's all Pluto energy. And for the first time, we're making the unconscious conscious. That's Pluto. So while it's going direct and indirect, it's less important. What's more important is, you know what sign it's in right now? It's in the sign of Capricorn, the government. So Pluto is destroying the government as we've known it. That's more interesting. And that lasts for another, I want to say that's another 5 years. It's been there since 2003, I think, or 4. I don't know when. It's a good question. When did Pluto enter Capricorn? I'm going to find that out right now.
Well, I'm curious too, because like if Pluto's destroying governments and things like that, if we take that from the macro level and take it just down to us, that can also mean that I would think at least, correct me if I'm wrong, destroying kind of old beliefs and stuff like that, schemas that we've had built up in our mind. Because my background's in counseling too. I have my master's in counseling. I used to be a therapist before going down this route. So I can really appreciate you throwing out Jung and Freud because I feel like that would be kind of crumbling all of those sort of rules that we had placed on ourselves.
It's not the mind. Capricorn is not the mind. It's governmental structure. What's different than Pluto in Capricorn is destroying the foundation. Look what's going on in the White House. I mean, it's not just here in England with Brexit. It's not the mindset. It's the physical forms that we relied on as normal or dependable or the leadership. Pluto is going, and next year, my prediction is 2000 and where are we? 2019, next
Mm-hmm.
year. I never know what date it is. That will be when Pluto and Saturn come together next year. That's where the government will really become, dismantled. And, it's predicted by astrologers, but it's nonetheless uncomfortable for all of us. And even though we're all slightly not slightly, we're all discouraged and we're all done with the old system, we don't have a new system.
Right.
And that's Pluto. Pluto destroys, just think Hitler. It destroys the form as you know it. And it's in Capricorn, which is government.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. When you say Pluto's going to join with Saturn, is that going to have any sort of particular impact for those that are in their Saturn return?
Yes, absolutely. Definitely.
So I'm in my Saturn return. I've had a lot of people write in that they're in theirs too. What can be some of those impacts that we might... Is that why we basically all feel like we're both floundering and also like getting bursts of energy forward and then like everything's getting flipped upside down?
I love the name of your podcast, Confused Millennials. Yes, that would explain why you're all floundering. Saturn return for all of you in 28 to 30, you can feel it somewhere about 27, but certainly 28 to 30, even to 31, is the most important marker of a lifetime. It occurs again at 58 to 60, again 57 to 61. But the first Saturn return demands, and with Pluto, it's just you guys are really getting hit. It demands a psychic and karmic and psychological breakdown. So whatever's going on in your life in your 20s, when you hit Saturn return, it's like the templates start to shift and the world starts to feel like, where am I going and what am I doing? And you'll either get married, you'll get divorced, you'll have a baby, you'll lose a baby, you find your family, you lose. It's like the most dramatic entrance into a spiritual wake-up call.
Mm-hmm.
So good news is here's Pluto. It arrived in 2008 and it will be there till 2024. So in this whole window, the government as we know it is changing. Now, personally for you guys, the millennials that are 28 to 30 right now who have Saturn in Capricorn, who have Pluto hitting their Saturn in that window, yes, you have to go consult an astrologer. And I have a host of certified astrologers. I very rarely do readings, but I have a large group that it's on my website where you can find a certified that I've trained, rigorously trained, that can look at your chart and go, oh, here's when Pluto's coming to get you. So it's good to know, just like it would have been wonderful if our society had astrologers saying, Trump's coming in. I dreamt it before it happened. Trump's coming in. He's going to destroy everything for good or for bad. Why? Because Pluto is demanding you personally, millennials, and the government breaks old structures because they're dated.
Makes sense.
Death and birth and Pluto rules birth, death, transformation, sexuality. An orgasm is the French word is small death, petit mort. An orgasm is you let go completely. You release totally this world. You look like an idiot. You make the weirdest sounds. Welcome to orgasm. So Pluto rules that. Like we are in a weird, strange, radical transformation. And it started in 2008. It will last to 2024. Isn't that crazy?
Wow. Okay. So it's a big, it's like a long transit.
It's very slow. Pluto is very little. That's why when they say it's going direct, it goes retrograde all year long. It goes direct, it goes backward. It only moves 3 degrees in a year because it goes retrograde so many times. It goes 1 degree forward, 2 degrees back, 3 degrees forward, 2 degrees back. So when someone says, what happens when Pluto goes direct? I'm like, excuse me? That happens every year. It's like saying, come on, that's not a good question. But I understand why everybody's asking it because people make up stories.
Well, yeah. And also I think there's just so much of that unknown of what it means when it is happening because we have heard it previously as this thing where like you may be experiencing more suicidal thoughts. You may be experiencing more of this.
Absolutely.
And so it's kind of like this fearful, I think almost like a fear thing has been struck because of the history, just as you kind of broke down so much.
Exactly right.
Especially if you're in your Saturn return, it's super fun.
So true. It's so true. It's such a good way to put it. Suicide, psychological depression, anxiety, feel all those things that we're all suffering from is Plutonian. And the upside, just to be putting in a positive note here, is it makes us psychologically savvy, which is what you've been studying. Like, what do you do with suicidal thoughts? What do you do with depression? What do you do with anxiety? Our parents, my grandparents didn't know the word anxiety. That wasn't a word they used.
Mm-hmm.
And they certainly didn't talk about Pluto.
That's probably very true.
My grandmother, Debbie, tell me about Pluto. No, that didn't happen.
Yeah, definitely does not happen in my house either. That'll be the day that's where we're moving though, I think. That's where we are moving.
That is the point. Pluto brought the transformation for you millennials, specifically for you millennials, to enter into a new conversation, which is what you're doing on this podcast. I work with Yoga Girl. I work with the Balanced Blonde. These are all individual women like you who are saying we have to start a new conversation. That's Plutonian. And we'll talk about deep, dark things because I just looked at your chart. You have this. Have you heard about the Yoga Girl?
No, I haven't.
So she has over 2 million followers on her podcast, and she has Sun in the 8th house like you do. Mm. Your gift is going deep.
Yes,
and the 8th house is ruled by Pluto. It's no surprise you started the conversation with Pluto. So it also rules psychology. You and I have it too. Sun in the 8th house. It only happens for a 2-hour window every day. So we were born in the same 2-hour window, which describes someone who really can't do short, stupid, dippy-doo-dah conversation. You have to go deep.
I hate them. Yeah. I pretty much, it's one of the biggest struggles of maintaining friendships is because I don't do surface. So it's tough for me of just like, how's the weather? Doing that like small coffee talk catch up. I'm like, this is kind of boring. Like I'd rather just like go be creating something or be off in my own little world. Like unless we're going deep, and then I'm like totally there with you. I'm that person.
That's called the 8th house. So you want to go read about the 8th house, and anyone that's born at 4:00 in the afternoon, depends what city you're in. It describes someone who is dealing with deeper psychological conversations that have meaning, or they get super bored and they can't play. It's like nails on a chalkboard being at a party for an 8th house person. You stand there and talk about what?
That was like, I think one of those things that was just a really big relief for me, because for so long I thought there was something wrong with me that I couldn't like do the light and fluffy and like boring stuff like go shopping. I'm like, that sounds like nails on a chalkboard to me. Like I would rather us go to like a moon circle and like pull out some crystals and tarot cards and try to figure out the meaning of life. Like that just sounds so much more interesting to me.
That's you. That's 8th house Sun. You just nailed it. And you're also Scorpio rising.
Yeah.
And that's ruled by Pluto. Pluto rules the 8th house, which is Scorpio, the house of Scorpio, your rising sign, and your profession. So psychology, your fascination with psychology, sources straight out of Pluto. You went straight. That's so funny. You went straight to the source.
I love it. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk. Somebody had asked if there was another planet besides the moon that can influence our emotional response to life. And I feel like, first of all, disclaimer, what Debra said earlier, it depends on your chart that different things are obviously going to impact you emotionally. Maybe it would be kind of good to go through like Mercury, because I know you talk about Mercury a lot. Like one or two sentences for like what each of the planets even mean. Like Pluto's the underworld and psychology and government.
Yeah, no, Pluto is not government. Capricorn's government. Pluto is the underworld, and it is the power planet of destruction and creation. It is death and birth, and it is power, and for good or for bad. Power of love, the planet of sexual pleasure. And then I always say it's so funny that sex, you can't tell if it feels good because of the way it sounds. You can't tell if they're hurting them or they're having fun. It's very Pluto.
Very true.
That's Pluto. Like, this is a good thing or is it a bad thing?
I don't know. More will be revealed.
So let's go through the 10 planets. So the sun is your personality. It describes your ego. And you can't stop being your sun sign. Now, if you only had one planet, let's say your sun was in Aries and the rest of your planets were all in different signs, you're not a classical Aries because you only have one planet in that sign. However, the sun is so important. It describes everything in our universe. Everything revolves around it. Everything aims for it. Every plant that grows leans into it. Every day we wake up, we're deciding what we're going to wear, depending on the sun. It tells us what to eat. It tells us what food's coming to our table. So it is the most powerful, although it's not based on the 9 other planets. It can get trumped. I hate using that word. The moon is your emotional, it's the nighttime. It's what happens on the inside of your psyche while you're sleeping in the emotional realm, in your unconscious mind. So the moon tells me how you respond emotionally when you're pushed up against the wall. I know, based on where your position of the moon is, Is it going to be someone that reacts? Is it someone that retreats? Is it someone that talks? Is it someone that fixes? Like, what do they do emotionally? I'll know based on where your moon is. It's different than your ego, your personality. That's the outgoing pleaser, trying to make everybody like you. The moon is a secret that goes internal. Mercury describes how your thought process is. Like, what's the internal dialogue that you suffer from? Because everybody has a little guy. I always wonder who pays him. He works way overtime, never stops talking. He's probably talking right now while I'm talking. He is a nonstop inner dialogue. That's Mercury. And I can tell where your thought process will go based on where your Mercury is. How does your mind operate? What's the way that your system takes information in? And then how do you learn? It's a very important thing for teachers, for example, when I work with teachers. This kid learns from hands-on. Mm-hmm. This kid needs to be left alone in a quiet room because they can't be distracted. This kid doesn't stop talking. Mm-hmm. You better give them something really busy to do, because as soon as they're free, because they think fast, they'll just start talking to everybody. So you get to know what the personality type is by their thought process. Very, very important, Mercury. Then comes Venus, and that's the planet of love and romance and what do you want in a relationship and what's your favorite thing to do and who do you want to partner with, and do you need to be talked to when you're falling in love, or do you need someone to be quiet? Do you want someone that's going to be intellectual, or do you want someone that's going to be practical? Because everybody has different values for a relationship. Mm-hmm. Mars is your male energy. It's how you spend energy. So I will know whether your propensity is physical, athletic, whether you hate exercise, whether you love to be assertive, whether you're avoidant, a conflict avoidant. You'll drive miles out of the way to avoid a conflict by where your Mars is. Mm-hmm. It's a red planet. It's male, and it's all about the expenditure of your energy. Mm. Then comes Jupiter. Jupiter is 300 times the size of Earth. Whenever I say it, I'm like, you can't even
glass.
like this big. It's that when you look up in the heavens at night and you say, "Wow, what is that big bright planet?" That will probably be Jupiter. It's that bright and that big, and it rules joy. It's the one benevolent planet in the zodiac. It's very funny. Mm-hmm. Ho, 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 green giant. You probably don't have that because it's my time period. But it's like this big, ho, 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 big, fat, round, green, joyful, money, eat, drink, party, and spend and go gamble. That's Jupiter. It's the planet of luck. And some people are born under a lucky star. That's because Jupiter was born on their head. Like it was on their sun. And you meet people like that and you say, how come you're so lucky? Everything goes like they get the happy family and they get the looks and they're super smart. And you're like, wow, you've been blessed. That would be Jupiter. Opposite of Jupiter is Saturn. He comes next. Very serious, very disciplined, very determined to get you to learn your lesson. So when Saturn return happens, it's this old man coming to your house going, excuse me, can you stop everything? I'm here. Can you notice that I'm here? You're going to have to change everything because I don't like what you're doing. He's not the friendly guy like Jupiter is. He's the high school principal who has a teaching for you. Mm-hmm. And he wants to know how many absences you had and when were you tardy and can we have this call your mom? And you're like, why are you like, leave me alone. Mm-hmm. And he knows your name and he knows your chart and he's waiting for you to come in and Saturn return. He's like, come with me.
You can't get out of this one.
Yeah. We need you right now. And he just opens the door and just goes, excuse me. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the police. Saturn's like the police. Mm-hmm. Then comes Uranus. Uranus was found during the French Revolution, the 1780s, American Revolution, when we broke every rule. Like if you think about the American Revolution, these people came, I love the story. They leave their country, they cut off heads, they throw everything to the wind, they get on a boat, they come to America, and the Queen says, excuse me, you will sell the tea from England, but you will give us the tax for it. And they say, screw off, and they throw the tea off the boat. Uranus rules complete, total abandonment and rebelliousness and maverick energy that says, no, I'm not listening. So I have a very strong Uranus. I hate saying that. But it just means that I can't follow. Like if it says don't park, I park there. Mm-hmm. If it says, the rules don't apply to a Uranian personality type. Okay. Welcome to Trump. He has Uranus on the sun. He cannot follow the rules of the office. He's not even interested. Pay taxes. Why would I pay taxes? Said Mr. Uranus.
I'm curious real quick on a tangent now. Do you find that people that are more narcissistic tend to have Uranus like on the sun, like Trump and things like that? Like maybe it's not narcissistic personality disorder. Maybe it's just like extreme rebellion.
Yes. I wouldn't say it's narcissism. I would say it's extreme rebellion.
Yeah.
Without a question. What are we drinking in that big, small cup?
Water.
Now you're making me thirsty.
Sorry.
Okay. Then after Uranus, the rebel, comes Neptune, who loves drugs. Neptune was found at the turn of the century when we found cameras that we can make a movie about Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, and you will believe that Toto's real. Like in your Neptunian imaginary world, that's what drugs do. They take you to an altered state, and you're high, and you're making up a story, and you come back and go, what did I say? What happened? Or you watch a movie, at the end of the movie, you're like, oh, and then you realize that was all imagination. And I totally fell for it. So Neptune rules other worlds and altered states and alcohol and being high because you can't stand this world. So they're escape artists. And then last and not least is Pluto, who is the little guy in the background who is very powerful. You can't see Pluto. We've never seen it with the human eye. They detected it from a telescope in Hawaii that was using electronic feedback systems about a planet. They still can't see it. In fact, astronomers about, I guess it was like 6 years ago, tried to demote it and say that Pluto wasn't a planet.
Which it is a planet.
It is but isn't it interesting? They wanted to demote the one that represented the unconscious. Mm-hmm. Like the one planet they wanted to take away was the one that rules our shadow. Mm-hmm. Like we are white astronomers, and we are going to tell you that the shadow doesn't exist. Excuse me. Just so you know, the Pluto is real. So yes, Pluto did not lose its status, but they did have 100 astronomers in a room decide to demote Pluto. I thought that was so fun.
That's so
funny. Those are the 10 planets. And then you want to know what sign they're in. You want to know what house they're in. You want to know the geometry. How are they relating to each other? Mm-hmm. And it's an in-depth conversation. And what's fascinating is I can tell by looking at your chart, like, this lifetime, this person came in with Jupiter. So good news is they're so lucky, they probably don't have to work. Mm-hmm. This lifetime, that person came in with Uranus. They're so rebellious, they can't fit in. Mm-hmm. So you can tell that's the gift of what I have a school that teaches people how to, in 6 weeks, learn this. It only happens, however, in September and January, and we're in October.
We just missed it.
Yes. But if you're interested in learning this, it's a very short class and it's very in-depth, and I teach the way I talk. It's like a 6th grade level, but I speak very succinctly. But your chart takes you, like you and I love the 8th house, deep into a dive where it's a psychological entrance into like, why do I do what I do? And how come I'm so quirky?
Yeah.
Because everybody's quirky. Have you noticed?
Everybody is quirky. And you have another site too, because somebody else, and I don't want you to answer this, but I know that her question can be answered by your site, how to follow moon cycles and what do the houses mean, which you have the Stargazers, correct me? Star Community. And that teaches millennials like all of this.
Right. So it's $22 a month, or you can buy a yearly. And then every single day, there's a video. You can go on there and find out where's the moon and when's the next new moon and when's the full moon. Yes. And you can learn astrology for $22 a month on a site. And yes, millennials really have populated that site.
Yeah, which I think is so cool. So definitely, especially if you're interested in the moon cycles and just learning about this regularly, like I find astrology is so complex that like, I think that type of site is where you're going to really need to be to actually learn it, to get it committed into your memory, to really kind of start to integrate it into your daily life. So I love that you have that offering.
And you know what's so exciting? It's so exciting that you're doing this because there's so many millennials that are starving. Like in New York Times article came out. Did you see that? No. Millennials' new religion is astrology.
Yes. Okay. I have seen a lot of the stuff about the rise of millennials going to astrologers and kind of everyone's really flocking to it.
And that's brand new. Back to our grandmas, back to our parents. They never did that.
Yeah. So wild.
Like if you're doing a job change or you have a new relationship or you don't know what you want to be when you grow up, these are all the most significant questions that you can ask an astrologer.
Wow, that's so cool. So one of my specific questions with astrology, this is a totally selfish question, but this is the one question I'm dying to know because I didn't have the knowledge back then. So when my friend had come on and she had done a reading, Danielle Page, episode 19 and 20, we did not announce I was pregnant yet at that time. And so she had told me offline from you guys that I actually conceived when like Saturn was like 2 degrees away, and that my actual delivery date range that they gave me literally we're basically the day Saturn goes direct in my chart is I'm pretty sure the day that this baby is coming to a T.
That's amazing. So you're pregnant right now?
Yes. So my question for you is, what does it mean like when parents and children have such, I know that they can have the same Saturn return, but like the same like direct down to the day Saturn return?
Well, it means karma. I mean, in a good way, but it means that this being is operating in this. I mean, first of all, lots of people have babies between 28 and 30. So you're how old?
I'm 29.
Yeah, it's classical.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, because it happens so much, and I teach this, that if the child is born with the same degree or close degree of your Saturn, that person has the same life lesson you have. So you're going to either be very useful to your child in teaching them the wisdom, or your child's going to be very irritating to you because they're triggering everything you came to learn.
I can see that. I can see it go both ways.
It's very intense because it's so accurate. And I was my mother's Saturn return baby. And it's always karmically the most significant child because the resonance of their issues are so similar, for good or for bad, depending on how you cope with your Saturns and Capricorn. So the question I have for you is, what's your relationship with work? How do you deal with your practical side?
Oh, work? I mean, I love working. I had left my career as a therapist because it wasn't working for me. I started my own business 4 years ago. And for me, it just feels very much like what I get to do and flow and like just try to find things that continue to light me up. And the more I'm lit up, the more money flows easily. And the more I try to like force things that aren't going to work, which I learned to stop doing, the money does not flow. So it's very interesting to see like when I've tried going down other people's paths, their dreams, how I hit walls. But then when I just like get weird and like just do whatever feels right and like expressing what feels right to me, you know, it's just everything pours in like the gifts of like, yes, you're on the right path. I'm like, okay, this is cool. I can work with this. It's definitely weird at times because you're like, there's no real roadmap other than just trying and seeing what happens.
So what is your business?
So I started my business changed a lot over the years. Right now where it's at is doing full-time blogging, content creation, the podcast. Going to probably start working on some books in the next couple years and all that fun stuff. And eventually more public speaking. I've been public speaking for 6 years, so probably start doing more of those as well in the future.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you started 4 years ago when you were 25?
Yes.
And now Saturn return. And are you feeling the shift right now?
In my career, yes. Because I would say like my big thing is that I have this existential crisis a lot where I feel like I'm on the right path. I feel really good about things, but things don't happen as quickly as I would like them to. So for example, at the start of this year in January, I had gone to shaman school and like the teacher had pulled a tarot card and somebody else was like, you know, the spirit council says like, you can't keep hiding. And like the tarot card was like, it's the time for the public recognition that you deserve and da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, okay, like everyone keeps telling me I need to step out into the limelight more and just be more forward facing. I'm like, I'm ready. And then I just feel like things don't necessarily happen. And then I'm like, maybe I'm not ready. Maybe this isn't the right time. Maybe I'm not on the right path.
And then you got pregnant.
And then I got pregnant in April.
So, you know, this is the problem I have with the New Age and shaman and tarot cards. And this is exactly what's asking, when does Pluto go retrograde? Because there's something to be said, especially for you with Saturn, because your life lesson's practicality, about staying inside of hard reality, which is slow. It's never the glory of you're going to be famous. And it took me, you know, I have now reached a level of success where I have those videos where they get 7 million hits. Like we've really reached a very high level of exposure and I get recognized and all that. That took a long time. One, because astrology was not popular. You guys are really helping me, the millennials. Two, because I was doing word of mouth. I didn't have an internet then. So I was doing it purely by word of mouth, which was not what this is. Three, life doesn't teach us lessons in the fashion that our mind would think would be appropriate. So you pick a card that says, go out and be in the public and be like, well, back at the ranch, I just have to go meet the next person who I'm going to go speak to. So if you minimize your expectations, especially for you with Saturn and Capricorn, and you give yourself permission to consider my value, especially as a Cancer, because you're 0 degrees Cancer, is going to be as a mom. Like there's no holier land on this planet. in ancient spiritual texts, householding was the highest road, not shamanism. Shamanism was exclusive to one person. I mean, we have so many shamans now. It was the one person in the culture, in the tribe, who stood away and did not live a soft life. They were always alienated. They were always separated. They were so weird. They had skeletons and drums and sounds, and they spit, and they did the weirdest things. Now shamans got the sexy quality. Like, I'm a shaman. Like, really?
Yeah.
So the modern day version of all of this has to get brought back down, especially for you guys with Saturn and Capricorn. So like, well, how can I actually make impact on my life, from my diet to my partner to my house to my kids? Like, let's start with you being integral as a Cancer, particularly to your family. That's where you get fame. And then the shaman part comes in when someone comes to seek you out. This will happen with time.
Oh, I didn't go back to shaman school. I left that. I was one of those roads I went down. I was like, oh, no, not for me. I'm not going back. I mean, I still work with my shaman Dirk, but like, I'm not trying to be a shaman. Like, I know that was like a really trendy career path.
What changed your mind?
I went and, for me, when I went to shaman school, I had already started like just working with Shaman Dirk. So shaman school wasn't with Shaman Dirk, who's been on this podcast before. And I felt like I already knew all of it before. Like, I felt like I was getting memories just from like past lives, if you will, studying this type of stuff. It felt very rudimentary to me. And so I was like, this is cool. I enjoy it, but this is not where I'm supposed to be spending my time. Like, this is not the answer for me this year. And, I had always felt like I was supposed to be a mom. So everything you're saying makes perfect sense to me. When I was little, everyone was like, you were meant to be a stay-at-home mom. Like, you are a housemaker. That is like what you're so good at. And so I personally think the direction of my career, and that's why I just try to take deep breaths through my existential crises, because I know that timing doesn't work how I want it to. But I truly believe that like my career is going to be tied to so much of just me figuring out how to navigate motherhood and fix those past karmas and get so into the deep psychological of like explaining that and helping people with that wisdom.
That's so beautiful, Rachel. So the point is the concept of the existential crisis, which by the way, every Saturn and Capricorn deals with, that is the flavor of Saturn and Capricorn. What's my purpose? What am I doing here? When am I going to be able to be successful? How do I measure my success? I can't be sure I'm even doing the right thing. I feel so. That is the ultimate conversation for all of you that are listening to Saturn and Capricorn. So let's just name that. And then what you do in astrology is you go, oh, that's so cute. You have a fixation. This is exactly what Mercury tells you. Like, oh, your mind keeps going on that existential. And then your observer kicks in and you go, the conversation should be this. How am I doing today as far as my own expression of having my heart open, having my house clean, and taking care of my body? Like, let's basically come back down. Like, am I really respecting? Because that existential thing takes us so far out, which I happen to love. Like you, I'm this deep. I've had that problem my whole life, the existential problem. But being in my 60s now, headed towards 70, I can't even believe it. It suddenly becomes more relevant. Like, wait a minute. My existential has been answered by the reflection of my life, because I've got all these years behind me. And the question was really annoying, but the answer was very obvious now. I've raised kids. I have a life that I'm fulfilled by. Oh, that's right. My purpose was to be me without that stupid question pushing me around into insecurity. It's a good question, but not if it drops you off into insecurity.
I love what you just said, because it's so true. Like, if we keep thinking about the question, we miss out on all of the gifts in that moment and everything we have and everything we've accomplished. But
you can't not, I mean, it's so profound and it's so noble of you to be here with us and ask the question. I'm just looking at your chart, Mercury and Gemini. Yes. So it's so important that your Mercury's in Gemini. So your mind, we talked about that. Mercury's your mind. It's in the sign of the insatiable curiosity. You are never, ever fed enough information for your mind to be satisfied.
That's very true.
like, give me more. So knowing that's the existential part. Like knowing that you are incredibly inquisitive, fascinated by everything. You're a cheap date. You can read the back of the toilet paper and get fascinated.
True story. First date with my husband, or second date with my husband, we did a crossword puzzle, and it was like the best date of my life. Love that stuff.
What sign is he?
He is a Virgo, Sun, Libra, rising, Pisces, Moon.
That's so good. Virgo, Libra. So he's got the same intellectual appetite you have.
Yes. So we are very he's also an entrepreneur, and we love like the intellectual and like figuring everything out and helping each other with all the problems and everything.
So why don't we say that your gift is the existential question I love that it's named that this podcast is confused. That's so you. The confusion is a wonderful thing, and the questions are wonderful. And please don't stop being hungry. Just be aware that you will never be satiated. So don't misinterpret. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I didn't get the answer. I haven't answered the life's questions why we're here. Just keep celebrating the question without the answer, and know that's the beauty. That's so liberating.
Mm. I love that. And you haven't even read the meaning behind my blog name, but you just nailed it, which is we're aiming the word confused, because it means we're asking questions, which means that we're getting to celebrate life and reclaim things. And we have an inquisitiveness that means that we're not just walking through life like zombies. Like that's the thing that excites me so much.
I'm so glad that do you know Trevor Hall's work?
Oh my God, we listen to him every single day. His music's amazing. His grandma lives where I live, and I'm like, I feel like such a stalker, because I'm like, how would it be really cool if I ran into him and his wife one day?
Yeah, they're my best friends. They just texted me while we were talking.
Oh.
He moved to Boulder. He lives just down the street.
Oh, very cool.
And he and I promote each other's work. So any of you out there who haven't heard Trevor Hall's music, he wrote a song called Karma. And mm-hmm. Karma was all based on his session. Like he studied astrology. He did the whole course. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of like my kid. I think of him, and he calls me his fairy godmother. It's just crazy. So his grandmother, that must be my mother, must live next door to you. The point of that story is those questions that he soothes with his music and the existential crisis that all of you are dealing with, it is satisfied once you take a spiritual practice, which is as simple as learning how to breathe consciously, doing yoga, going for a bike ride, making sure that you put on your favorite music. It's meditation and spirituality does not have to be tarot cards, shamanism, and meditating for 3 days in silence. But there has to be a practice. Mm-hmm. Discipline, if there's one reason why I don't look like I'm headed towards my 70s, why I've kept my youth, is because every single day since I was 20, I've either swam, done yoga, done hiking, every day I do a devotional physical practice for me. Some people can sit, I can't. And I would suggest to all of you out there, especially if you're Saturn's in Capricorn, discipline is one of the most important words. Now, it doesn't have to be like mean discipline, like you think of the word like you're in the army. It's just more like, what can I do with myself that will be respectful? So if you have a householding Miss Cancer and you love giving and providing, that's your spiritual practice. Who can I give to would be Rachel's question.
Mm-hmm. So cool. Yeah. His music that he wrote, especially during his Saturn return, like Don't Rush Your Healing, that song and everything, man, if anyone's going through their Saturn return, they really do need to listen to Trevor Hall. And even when you're not going through it, it's absolutely it's spiritual. It's such an amazing.
It's healing. And that song, you can't rush the healing for anyone in Saturn return, because Saturn return takes so long and it's so hard. Mm-hmm. It just leaves you with the angst constantly of what is my spiritual purpose. That's all you are such a great example. What's my spiritual purpose and how do I make sure I'm fulfilling it? And she's pregnant. Well, you're fulfilling it by bringing in a being who's more conscious than you. Mm-hmm. That was my prayer during my pregnancy. Bring me a being more conscious than me that I can be its student as well as its teacher.
I've actually said that prayer more in different words, but exactly that sentiment before. Exactly.
There you go. Bring me a being more conscious than me that I can be its teacher as well as its student. Mm-hmm. And I did. But you have to know that motherhood, and especially for cancer, but any one of you that are thinking of children, that is the greatest contribution, because those beings that are coming in now are so much higher than we are. And they are coming in to help us in this transition. And we are in a very difficult spot. Don't let anyone pretend for 1 minute that this is normal. And not to say that the plague or the Renaissance, or there's been times in history, or when Jesus arrived, that there weren't moments in time where everything went, whoa! Mm-hmm. This is a particularly difficult one because there's 7.5 billion of us. We've never, ever had this many people. So the pressure is on vibrationally. There is so much pain. Mm-hmm. And there is so much pleasure at the same time going on. I mean, everyone's obviously making love. Or how did all these people get here?
Mm-hmm.
You ever think about that?
pleasure we all have figured out. Now we have to figure out all the mess that comes with everything.
And that's where Trevor comes in. You cannot rush your healing, and pain is real. And the way you can medicinalize, it's a word I made up, where you give yourself medicine, is you do your practice, you listen to music, you eat clean food, you devote yourself to some discipline of yoga or whatever you do. Astrology is a great practice to come to the voice of compassion. Like, how else do you fall in love with yourself if you don't get to know your charts? That's Trevor's words. You have to know your stars to know your soul. Trevor.
I just get goosebumps. He's so good. Like it's poetry. It's
poetry. You have to know your stars to know your soul. So if any of you are sitting there confused, because we're going to hang up here soon, if you're confused and you can't figure out what to be when you grow up, or you can't figure out why life is being mean to you, or you can't figure out the existential, I love Rachel's question, the existential, what are we doing here? You see wisdom through astrology, and the stars are, they're ancient, timeless, been here forever, going to be here forever. And astrology was handed to us by a very profound system that is airtight. I mean, I don't really understand how we maintained it over 5,000 years, but it's the one thing that's endured.
Unbelievable.
The oldest science and the oldest religion, it's not really religion, the oldest science on earth is astrology.
Ugh, it's so unbelievable, and it has so many cool things. So with that, where can everyone find you so that they can keep learning more about astrology, so they can work with you, so they can join the schools, everything? My Jewishness is coming out with my hand movements. You guys can't see it, but we're doing a lot of Jewish hand flails. I don't want to know.
Okay, so you go, it's Debra, Debra, DebraSilvermanAstrology.com. You go to my website. I have a book called The Missing Element that I sign copies and mail them to people, like good old-fashioned snail mail. So if you want to buy that book, and it will describe for you in very simple terms, it gives you a test in the middle of the book, what is my personality type and what's my missing element. So that's, then there's the Star Community, which is $22 a month, and you can actually study as a beginner or advanced. And then there's a school, which is twice a year, and you just write to apprenticeship, one word, apprenticeship, at 3 words, DebraSilvermanAstrology.com, and then you can get information about the school.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. It was, just thank you. This was so awesome.
I'm so thankful that you included me in your podcast, and I look forward to more. I really enjoyed you.
Oh, thank you.
All right. You guys have a beautiful Saturn return. Bah!
All right, you guys. I hope you can see why I say that she's just a ball of energy. That's so infectious. She has so much wisdom, so much going on in that head of hers, which I absolutely love, and can't thank her enough for spending this time with us. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit the subscribe button and leave 5 stars. It really helps. And another reminder, we are now dropping the podcast episode down to every other week. So we will be back in 2 weeks. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to screenshot it and tag me on Instagram at The Confused Millennial, so that way I can say hi. I can maybe share it on my Insta story. And I just love connecting with you guys. So until 2 weeks from now, have an awesome life. Well, that sounds kind of depressing. Have an awesome time. Enjoy the fall, and we'll go with that.